Good evening, and welcome to this online event, Are the Robots Coming? A discussion about artificial intelligence, AI, and its representations in cinema. I'm Johnny Best, the Artistic Director of Yorkshire Silent Film Festival. Good evening, and welcome to this online event, Are the Robots Coming? A discussion. There's the first technical glitch of this evening. I'm Johnny Best. I'm the Artistic Director of Yorkshire Silent Film Festival, an organisation which presents live-scored silent film around the North. And as part of our 2023 season, we're screening Fritz Lang's 1927 film Metropolis in Holmfirth, Morecambe, Chester and Hull. And sometimes we're double billing it with Blade Runner from 1982. Both films depicting human-like robots with a general human-like intelligence, indistinguishable or almost indistinguishable from actual humans. We'll come back to that a little later. But first, let me introduce this evening's guests. Isabella Hermann is an independent analyst and speaker in the area of science fiction. She's got a doctorate in political science and focuses on the question of how the genre reflects new technologies, socio-political value systems, and global politics. Isabella also acts as co-director of the Berlin Sci-Fi Film Fest and is a member of the board of a Berlin-based foundation on democracy and the future. Tony Prescott is Professor of Cognitive Robotics at the University of Sheffield and the creator of several award-winning animal-like robots. His background mixes psychology and brain theory with robotics and AI, and his research aims at answering questions about human nature by creating synthetic entities with human-like capacities such as perception, memory, emotion, and sense of self. In a moment, I'll ask each of them to say a little bit more about themselves and what they're up to. But first of all, just let me say the event will be sort of 45 minutes long. We might go up to an hour, depending on how many questions we have and how the conversation flows. As Isabella and Tony are discussing things, please feel free to submit questions via the chat in YouTube. No need to wait until the end. We're happy to have the questions coming in through the conversation. And I'll do my best to feed some of them into the discussion at opportune moments. And there'll be a bit of time for Q&A at the end as well. So please, if you've got something to ask, don't hold back. Isabella, would you like to say just a little bit more about yourself, and then we'll pass to Tony?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the nice introduction. I'm based in Berlin. Right now here it's 1 hour later. It's already quite late. And okay, no, seriously. What I do actually as an independent science fiction analyst, my angle is always socio-political because I study political science. And what I think is so interesting is really the power structures and how are the visions of the future? What does it mean for society? How is society different? And then AI comes in and robots come in, and sometimes or more often than not, those AI systems and those robots might be metaphors actually for the present or even the past, which makes it quite interesting because, then science fiction becomes like a mixture between real possible tech development as a vision for the future on the one side, and on the other side, it's a reflection of the here and now, of the present and what's going on right now. And then robots might become, a projection canvas or a metaphor for things that are going on right now. So this is, I guess, why I think this genre is so fascinating, being between, the future and actually the present and the past.
Thanks very much, Isabella. And Tony, please say a little more about yourself.
Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me, Johnny. So I am a professor of cognitive robotics at the University of Sheffield. So I'm based in Yorkshire, but today I'm actually in Marseille in France. I'm here for the Human Brain Project final summit. So the Human Brain Project is a 10-year project to try and build a computer model of the human brain. And I can tell you that the project hasn't got there quite, but they are making progress. And one of the things that is being discussed at the summit is what will the future look like, and can we have models of the human brain which have consciousness? That's a big question. Can we have models of the brain which could control robots to do human-like things? And there are some of those that we already have. So my background is actually in psychology and neuroscience, as well as robotics. So I studied psychology first, followed by AI, and my PhD was machine learning. And in the past, I guess, nearly 30 years, I've been building robots and programming robots, mainly to try and understand human psychology and the human brain. So most of the robots I build and the programs I develop are based on trying to understand human cognition and neural networks as we find them in the brain, and we put those into robots to see if we can get robots to do animal-like and human-like things, and we test them that way. I can show you a quick video of, this is actually a robot that was developed by a team in Italy, but we did a 6-year project to try and give it human-like cognition. This is actually 6 years old, this video, so it's not state of the art, but it will give you an indication of the sorts of things that we're doing. Let me find the video somewhere here. Can you see that?
Yes.
I can.
Great. Okay. So let me play this. So the video is made in a lab in Barcelona.
Hey, music. Yeah, sure. Let's go. Let's try some new rhythm. Okay, show me. Nine. All right, loop. Then sliding. More rhythm, please. Oh, nice. I feel music is in the essence. Ah, not yet. Tap. Tap. Let's try some new rhythm. All right. Sliding. This is nice. Thanks. I like the two. Okay, let's change the music. Okay. Sliding. I could have played for hours with you. I enjoyed our music session. Would you like to play another game? Okay, let's play prom. Go. I am the best. Oh, so fast. No way. Sorry. Not bad. Done. Got it. Not bad. Bloody hell. That isn't fair. I should be stronger at video games. Okay, man, I'm sorry you got wrong. I like when you touch me in this way. Yeah. Please, caress me again. One day robots will take over Europe.
So that's a slightly light-hearted look at the sort of things we've done in our research. That was the robot was performing live controlled internally. So it's autonomous. There's nobody pulling the strings, but the language is partly scripted. Now, if we're doing that today, we could use ChatGPT, and the language would be much more spontaneous and more realistic. And the motor control and the vision, everything's moved on in 6 years. So robots now can do a lot more than we showed in that video. Our robot had artificial emotions, and we could talk about whether they're the same as real ones or not, perhaps later.
Thanks, Tony. I love that your robot swears. That's it's adorable. Which sort of leads. I was going to ask a different question, but that film, the video, leads directly to this question of robots as friends and companions. Now, obviously, the films that I mentioned earlier, robots are running amok, and they're slipping the control of their human masters, and it's a common trope in science fiction. But what you've just showed us raises the question of robots as friends and companions. I mean, that robot was cute. It was I felt warmth towards it. Now, to what extent am I participating in an illusion, or is it what is that a part of the future of robots, that we will find friends in these machines?
I think so, and actually, you're not alone. Most people feel warmth towards the iCub robot and other robots. Another robot I developed is a pet-like animal robot, it's a mixture between a puppy and a bunny, and people instantly feel warmth and want to pat it, and they actually find it quite rewarding when they stroke its plastic shell and it wags its tail. So people very easily project things like emotions onto robots and recognize them as social others. Now, some people will argue that the robots are faking it, and by creating these robots, we're doing something unethical by sort of fooling people into treating robots as potential social partners. I would say something different. I would say that actually they could be social partners, but right now they're not very good social partners, but in the future, they might get better at it. And for issues like, human loneliness, we can't always have as many human friends and contacts as we might want. And we do use TVs and radios as substitutes for human contact. So why not robot friends as well?
So if I might add something, maybe, yeah, sure, absolutely. And one part of the question of ethics is if it is ethical, to build robots like that. I would say another question is what kind of companies could build those robots in the future, and are they going to manipulate humans and control them and surveil them, right? Because a robot per se, even if it seems aware, it's actually not. So it always acts according to the will of the people or the business leaders or whatever who's behind that robot. And because of that, I think also in science fiction, if you have, for example, in Star Wars, we talked about that before, you have those very nice ethical robots, or let's say Data in Star Trek, who always acts very ethical. You kind of distract from the fact that there are always companies behind it who build those machines for a purpose. So I think this is really also an ethical question we need to take into account.
I mean, I would agree completely. I think it's the human ethics here. It's the ethics of the robot builders, which might be questionable. And we could build robots which are entirely ethical, and they would live their lives doing ethical things. They'd be more ethical than any human, I think. But the risk is that humans will build them to do unethical things, like, sort of coerce people, manipulate people, and that's all possible. And we must be careful not to allow that to happen.
Well, without robots doing unethical things, there are not there's not much robotic science fiction left, is there? So, which leads me to the question. Well, science fiction has sometimes appeared to predict the future, or maybe inspire the future. Georges Méliès's 1902, A Trip to the Moon, showing a rocket journey to the moon, prefigured actual journeys to the moon by decades. So when it comes to robots and AI, how well has science fiction cinema done at predicting or representing the actual science?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because there's a dialogue between science and engineering and the creative arts. So the ideas come from the creative arts, and then scientists and engineers build them inspired by those ideas. And it's interesting, for example, the robot in Metropolis, Maria, if you look at that and compare it to some modern day robots, how closely they resemble, Fritz Lang's idea of what a humanoid, a gynoid might look like. So I think the scientists and engineers borrow from the science fiction, and obviously science fiction builds on the technology of the day, but then tries to imagine it taken forward. So I think you also see that recapitulated in film, is that the latest ideas and the latest ideas what the future be like get incorporated into the movies.
Yeah, I would totally agree. There is a constant, interchange or discourse between engineers and computer scientists and science fiction writers or filmmakers. And in fact, where this discourse or those conversations happen, then the prediction might be quite good. But, there are, what I want to say, we only remember the good predictions, but all the science fiction that has been produced with robots and AI, which didn't come true, let's say like that, we just, if it's not good science fiction and we forgot about it, then we don't mention it right now. So we pick the ones when we talk about, now, and we have voice assistants, and in Star Trek, they talk to the computers. We remember that because it was kind of successful as a prediction. So I think, the selection is kind of biased also. But secondly, what I also think is interesting that maybe science fiction doesn't actually have the task to make predictions. So what I said before, that robots can be also metaphors or can be a projection, for human issues. You have in a robot, if you ever have a humanoid robot like that, like in Blade Runner or in Ex Machina or a Data in Star Trek, you will never know. But in the story, they also fulfill a certain task. They are a plot device, where we see our human image, where we see our human fears. And then, sometimes, it's not necessarily a criteria for good science fiction if it makes good predictions.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that a lot of the time we see robots depicted in science fiction movies. It's really a story about the human, and the robot is there to sort of to embody an idea of a certain kind of human, maybe a different human, or the human we see inside ourselves that we're frightened of. So I think in that sense, the robot is replacing things like vampires and zombies as the bad guy in a lot of movies, particularly because robots can embody that thing that we see in psychopath movies, of things which can kill without having any moral compass, without having any regret. I think Megan, the film Megan, is a bit like that. She slips from being a friendly companion robot to being a psychopath. And clearly we can think about robots and understand that there is no moral compass. If they're programmed to kill, they can just kill. But that's really a film about ourselves and our fear of that switch in ourselves, that we could also flip over onto the dark side and do these really horrible, inhumane things. And that's played out through the robot on screen.
Now, with that in mind, of course, the use of vampires in that sort of narrative way doesn't particularly have an impact on the real world because vampires aren't real. But with robots and AI, we're currently at this moment where the public discussion of these issues is exploding. It was the lead item on the Radio 4 news just a couple of hours ago. The question of what the human relationship with AI and is going to be in the coming years is a real one and an urgent one. And to what extent is that public debate being negatively affected by this use of robots and AI as the villain, as the baddie, as the psychopath, the fascist? It's dramatically, incredibly exciting and useful to every screenwriter and novelist. But what's it? What are its? Is it having negative effects on our ability as a society to evaluate and assess these technologies and what our relationship with them will be?
I mean, just to get started, in the past, when vampire stories came up, it was not clear that vampires don't exist. So this was also, a way to handle those fears in the past. I mean, now with the scientific progress, we know vampires don't exist as in the stories, and our whole life is full of technology. And now this person or this figure becomes now the robot in our world full of technology. And of course, there is always a link to what is now going on, what is the tech development. But just to mention, in the past, it was actually the same with vampires or with the Frankenstein figures, just to kind of trying to handle those fears you couldn't explain. So it's kind of a transmission belt, I'd say.
Yeah, you think we're processing those anxieties rather than...
Yeah, absolutely.
What about you, Tony? I mean, how do you feel as a scientist? I mean, are you frustrated by the dramatic representations and the fears they...
I mean, I think most people haven't encountered a robot, or if they have, it might be a vacuum cleaner robot or something like that. But when we see robots in movies, we nearly always see humanoids. Things that look like us and resemble us, but have this frightening, superpower, or they can go on forever, like Terminator. Even when you melt them, they come back. So I think, as we've said, that this is a kind of representation of and part of our fear of ourselves and a projection of that onto another. But one of the effects is actually that a lot of AI gets developed and comes into the world and has big impacts, but we don't notice it so much because it's not embodied. And even when people want to talk about AI, they often use a picture of a robot, and actually quite often they use a picture of the Terminator to represent generally our fears of AI. So robots get a lot of stick for being the bad guys, when actually the threats might come, for example, through AI. I mean, AI is the threat to sort of human privacy. Right now, AI is the threat to human jobs. If you think ChatGPT might be taking a lot of jobs away, that's an AI system. Now, the robots, in some sense, they do the work that we don't want to do. They do the repetitive, boring, dull, dangerous work. And they make our economies much more productive. But they do get this bad image from the movies because they're nearly always, not always, there are positive robot movies, and we can maybe talk about those. But in most of the movies, the AIs are these dangerous sort of psychopaths that just want to kill people. And we did a big survey. We looked at all the papers that looked at attitudes to robots, and we found that despite all this science fiction, the average person has a mildly positive attitude towards robots. So I think we are, despite all of this, we are still quite interested and intrigued by robots, and we can see some benefits from them.
When it comes to assessing the risks of AI, all kinds of very clever people have warned us that AI will has the potential to bring about the downfall of humanity. And it seems to be an interesting situation that those warning about AI are not necessarily cranks on the fringe, but sometimes people very much within the world of science and wondering about it. But human beings have always been anxious about the next new technology. You know, we're still people of my generation are still worried about mobile phones and the internet. So, to what extent are these anxieties about AI just the usual human anxiety about new steps technologically, or is there something distinctly different about AI? How should the ordinary person like me really be thinking about AI? How much should we be worrying?
Well, if you go back to the 1950s when AI was just kicking off, people then, scientists who were developing AI, were saying that in a decade or even less, robots would be doing human jobs. And if we were lucky, they would be keeping us as pets. Marvin Minsky, one of the founders of AI, said that. So there's always been this tendency to think the development will be faster than it is. If you look at people's predictions, for example, if you go to AI conferences, ask them to predict when AI will surpass humans, the average is about 20 years, which is conveniently beyond the careers of most of the people at the conference. But it's also near enough in the future that you can get excited about it. I think what will be interesting is when that number comes down, if people are saying 10 or 5 years. And I've noticed in the past few weeks, actually, people are talking about stuff happening at an increasing rate. So it could be that we're closer to what people call the AI singularity than we were 10 years ago. It's also, I think it's not just one thing. If you look at different areas of human expertise, we've been passed by AIs some time ago. We had AIs playing grandmaster chess in the late 90s, and we've got AlphaGo winning at Go just in the last 5 years. We've got AIs now driving cars, ChatGPT, I think, passing exams to get into law school, this sort of thing. So the different areas of human expertise where AI has already gone past humans. And what we tend to do is shift the goalposts a bit and say, well, the really important thing about humans is that we're emotional or we're creative or whatever. And I think that then becomes the target for AI as well. So there's this idea of a general artificial intelligence, which is where you create something which has all of the aspects of intelligence of a human. And there is a program to try and create that. And if we do get to the point where we have a general artificial intelligence that matches human intelligence, it could potentially improve itself quite rapidly. And that's when you get superintelligence. So there are, I think, reasonably a number of people warning about this, and that we have to think about what we're doing and where it's going to lead. And I think the film industry has been good at sort of prompting these kind of thoughts. I'm sorry, I'm aware I'm sitting in the almost complete darkness here because it was broad daylight outside when we started the conversation. Would you like me to turn some more lights on?
No, it's extremely atmospheric.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you're also in France, so it's 1 hour late, so it's really quite dark. So, but again, I have to say, I agree to what Tony just said. I mean, it's kind of boring because we always agree, we don't have a controversial panel. Yeah, but maybe I thought maybe 3 things maybe on that, because again, I think what's also quite dangerous is, again, the companies that are behind those AI applications, right? And we have huge monopolies, we have big tech corporations, and they collect our data and then they sell our data. So what happens, all the social platforms are done in a way to get our attention. So how do you get attention? With emotional polarized stuff. So, debates get heated to collect data. And this is all AI powered. These are AI engines, right? the whatever Facebook algorithm.
Looking at algorithms.
Yeah. I mean, this is how would you define AI, right? But of course, it's kind of an it's an algorithm how the system works. So so again, this is also again a problem. What people are with what interests behind the AI systems. And then I thought, secondly, coming back to science fiction, when we have also those robots, and sometimes, you know, they claim full human rights or they are marginalized in the society, and then they freak out or whatever because they're traumatized. So again, they could be a mirror for people. But then also, you know, for real people working right now with AI, like content moderators or click workers, they have now to do the bullshit jobs, the harmful jobs, and are psychologically harmed. And maybe the humanoid robots in science fiction, then are not really part of society, you know, and don't have full rights. Maybe they could also be a metaphor for really people right now, here in the present, negatively affected by AI because they have those mentioned working conditions. And what I also thought, thirdly, when we have those very almighty, powerful AI systems like Skynet in Terminator, for example, I think they are also a metaphor or an image for our fear of totalitarian control. So, you know, it's not only about, oh my God, we are afraid that there is a general AI and it gets so powerful and will dominate us, but a very general fear of ideologies, about control by political systems, you know, as an individual not being able to claim any rights or whatever. So it's really primarily fears that are also negotiated through those AI depictions, I guess.
But this is this where there is a genuine and well-founded anxiety in terms of how human relationships to transnational corporations? I mean, that feels like a real worry rather than a fantastical.
I guess it is very real, yeah.
Yeah. Are we? Is artificial intelligence our slave, as it is in as it begins in Blade Runner, or do we end up becoming somehow enslaved to it?
Yeah. I think real life is recapitulating science fiction, you know, in that we've got these incredibly rich individuals who are, you know, very technologically savvy. They're a bit sort of mentally disturbed, as you might describe it as, you know, sort of, you know, certainly they're not sort of run of the mill in terms of when you interact with them, you think, well, there's something a bit different about this person. And they have all this wealth, and they're directing a lot of that wealth towards developing these technologies, which will, you know, push AI, push robotics. And so, yeah, you could imagine this being written as a science fiction movie. And in fact, it has been. Ex Machina, as you know, is the story there is that the founder of a social media company who's living in the wilderness and building these really human-like robots and trying to explicitly get robots that are beyond human. And it's not a big leap to take some of our existing billionaire technical people and say, yes, they might be doing that. And the problem is we don't know what these companies are doing behind closed doors because they haven't declared their research. There's no sort of external governance. I think Google talked about creating a governance panel and then pulled back from doing it properly. So it's a scary situation, and one that, you know, is worthy of, you know, looking at with the lens of science fiction, because it's a good way to draw people's attention to these risks that we're taking on, you know, as humanity.
Let me just say, if you're out there watching and listening on YouTube and you've got a question for Isabella or Tony, or just a comment, please do type it up in the comment panel on YouTube, and I'll pass it on to Tony and Isabella, please don't hold back if there's anything you want to ask. So when it comes to science fiction cinema, what are the films that you feel are particularly insightful or interesting when it comes to representations of artificial intelligence? Isabella.
Yeah, Tony just mentioned Ex Machina. So it is a well done film, and it was also very controversial, and it's very aesthetical. So I think it's really a good film. And it also conveys, you know, some myths and really problematic stuff. So you have this toxic Silicon Valley guy, Tony, you just mentioned, right, who is actually a sociopath. But you know what Ex Machina tells us, so it is possible that one genius guy is just in the wilderness and builds those super advanced robots. But I mean, in reality, it's teamwork. So there is this wonderful documentary how they built, DeepMind built the AlphaGo algorithm, and it is just teamwork. There were so many people involved, you know, and constantly kind of with many post-its. So it wasn't clean desks, you know, all AI. They had post-its everywhere, and it was dirty, and they ate pizzas and stuff. So actually, it's teamwork, and this is also this sci-fi myth. You know, it's all clean and it's all very sterile and stylish, and that is how it works. So yeah, I mean, we have this toxic Silicon Valley leader there, which is a negative image, which I think it's also important, you know, to reflect on that. But at the same time, it's teamwork. And then because Tony, you said the guy is building robots, absolutely, but he's explicitly building robot women. And in science fiction, there's a long history of those fembots, which is especially women being controlled by men, right? So this Ava, the female robot, could also be an image like what's the status of women in the tech industry or of women in general in the society. And you also have a mirror for that, because now it's different, but in the past you had those voice assistants with female voices, but this is changing. But you know, we have this kind of women serve, they're subordinate, so they are like the voice of the voice assistant, and this is reflected in an extreme in Ex Machina. And what is actually the worst thing is that she can escape. She becomes conscious in the logic of the film when she's able to manipulate men. So this is like, you know, the thing. Now she's conscious. So what does this tell us? A woman is intelligent if she's able to flirt around and manipulate men. So, you know, she gets what she wants. And, you know, I think this is kind of a problematic story, because if you look at other male robots like Data, or this Andrew in Bicentennial Man, or they are not only defined by, you know, flirting with women, and now they are human. It's only one part. So interesting film, and you see, you can really discuss a lot what's going on in society. So being a mirror of what's up to in the present.
What about you, Tony?
Well, I mean, I agree that Ex Machina is a great movie. Another movie that I really like is Ghost in the Shell, both the original cartoon manga version from Japan, I think it was the 80s, and I still like the Hollywood remake, which has been criticized, but it does change the plot in a way I don't like, but they were really good at recreating in live action some of the cartoon sequences in the original manga. So that's what I love about the remake. But what's interesting of the plot of that movie is it's a person it's a half person, half robot. So the Ghost in the Shell is a human brain inside a robot body. So it's exploring this notion of the cyborg. And I think that's a really important notion, because when we think about the impact of robotics and AI in the future, maybe we will build AI and robots and they might enslave humans. But another possibility, which is perhaps more likely, is that we will merge with the technology. I mean, we already are merging with the technology. Do you know anybody that doesn't carry a smartphone around with them at all times? And how panicky do you get when you lose your smartphone? So you have more or less merged with your smartphone. That is an external memory. It's a communication device. It does all these things to you. It's an extra bit of your brain that lives outside your body. So it's not a small step, not a big step to imagine, that technology being on your body, being wearable, maybe being inside your body, which is would then make us cyborgs. So I think Ghost in the Shell really explores this idea of the cyborg and the possibility that the future of humanity is to merge even more than we already have done with our technology. And another really good idea in Ghost in the Shell is that we are our memories. So one of the plot twists, and don't think I'm giving too much away in Ghost in the Shell, is that people can have their memories erased or replaced with false memories. And it really brings across this realization that we are our memories. So if you can implant into somebody's brain the memory of an entirely different life, they will believe themselves to be that person. And that could be possible in the future, that we could have memory implants, that we could change memories through brain-machine interfaces and so on. So that's a whole another area of technology which is related to AI and robotics, but actually comes close to the person. So we already have lots of smart prosthetics, sort of artificial retinas and things. So we can restore vision, we can restore hearing. We will, I think, have prosthetics for the brain, so that you can, if you're beginning to lose your memory, you might be able to replace it with a chip in the future. And though this distinction between human and technology will gradually be reduced, we gradually sort of grow more and more into these technologies.
That's a fascinating prospect, and one that I imagine would unnerve some people in all kinds of ways. The
Borg in Star Trek.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, becoming having a sort of embodied relationship with technology is, in principle, is not so strange. It's what every musician and their musical instrument does. This the closeness of relationship between the human being and technology. But somehow, when it's electronic technology, when it's digital, there's this imaginative leap that we have to make to it, which is alarming. And talking of ideas that are slightly alarming, I see, Tony, that you are interested in robots developing a sense of self, and that your research touches on this issue. What?
Well, I mean, and this comes back to science fiction movies, and a lot of the science fiction movies about robots, there is something that it's like to be the robot. And that's why we have all these robots that are, these movies that are concerned about the condition of the robot, what it's like to be the replicant in Blade Runner, whose life has been set so that come 30 years, everything will shut down. And this is an entity that has been made to be really biomimetic, sort of. The replicants are copying humans almost down to the detail of nerve fibers. And so they're very similar to us, so much so that you have to do special tests to decide who's a replicant and who's a human. So it really looks at this question of what is it to be a human, and could there be an artificial human? And Blade Runner really comes down on the side of the replicants to some extent. Why couldn't these people, why shouldn't we treat these things as having selves, as therefore potentially having rights and so on? And a lot of other movies look at this idea. Spielberg's AI, for example, the robot boy who grows up wanting to be a real boy. And then there's many others. Westworld, particularly the sort of TV remake, is all about these individuals who are, they're robots, and they have to play out all these horrible fantasies of humans. And the only reason they keep doing that is because their memory gets wiped out at the end of the day, so they don't remember what's happened. So, so I think it's quite easy for us to imagine robots with a sense of self. And some people will say, if you're not biological, you can't have a sense of self. But as a scientist, you have to explain why you believe that to be the case. And I can't see a good justification for it. I don't think we have robots or AIs right now that could have a sense of self, but I do think we have the beginnings of things which could have what you might call sentience. You know, there might be something that it's like to be a really complex robot, one with memory, one with a sense of what's part of its body and what's not part of its body, the sort of self-other distinction that is natural to us. You know, one that is able to recognize other people as social actors. So an awareness of, if you like, the interpersonal self. You know, it can remember what happened yesterday. It can think about what happened tomorrow. That's another aspect of self, being able to mentally travel in time. So the one thing that maybe technologically is missing is consciousness, but we don't really know what consciousness is. And at the Human Brain Project this week, we're talking about how the brain generates consciousness. But on one level, and we could talk about this, the brain is just a huge, you know, massively parallel sort of biological computer. And if it's generating consciousness, then why couldn't the brain of a robot do the same thing?
And yeah, quite interesting. So you can see in science fiction, when we have those robots with a consciousness which are self-aware, we can like treat that as, oh, okay, in the future, how should or do we need or must we deal with this kind of robots if they ever get developed? So, you know, it's really seeing this, okay, this might be, you know, some guide, and science fiction plays that through, and maybe in the future we can look at that and see, okay, now we need to handle it like that. And on the other side, it's also interesting because in the films, the robots are self-conscious. You know, they are already. So there is something in the film which is actually, this is the science fiction part. So they are played by real actors. They're not played by robots. They're played by humans. You know, Ex Machina is played by a human actress, like the child in AI. Spielberg's AI is a real child actor. So this tells us, okay, it is actually a human. And this makes those robots, again, an image for maybe in the past, in the present, people who are treated as if they were not humans, even though they are. Like if we, you know, think about slavery in the past, or right now about migrants who cannot enter or whatever, like second-class people who are actually people and are as conscious as any other folks, but they are not treated the same. And I think in that way, science fiction with those human robots played by human actors is a great image for that.
Thank you very much. I think this is a great place to start to wind up. If there's any final thing you want to say to the audience, please go ahead and say it. Say it now. Any final thoughts that we want to offer? It's interesting that we're talking about a turn in science fiction from robots as villains, as psychopaths, as destroyers, to a sort of turn towards humans being the villains, and robots becoming a metaphor for dispossessed humans in science fiction. So that process of science fiction, of science fiction processing human thoughts, human politics, human desires is going to continue. Tony,
I'm not sure that, I mean, because I was watching Metropolis the other day, and it's this, you know, so the real evil in Metropolis is the humans, particularly the humans that are, exploiting this underclass of workers, and they're all having horrible lives while the people living in these high towers are having wonderful lives. And then the robots in that film is also a kind of victim. It's kind of goes two ways, but it's certainly more of a neutral figure than the sort of tycoon who rules Metropolis.
Yes.
So I think it's quite easy to sort of identify with the robot in many of these movies. The Terminator and a few others, whether the robot is a psychopath, is a particular subgenre. But I would say maybe more often, particularly nowadays, there's this much more nuanced view of robots, certainly, and the possibility that robots could be another kind of sentient entity. And going back to Star Wars, I think one of the nice things about the robots in Star Wars is they're not particularly human-like. I mean, you've got C-3PO, but R2-D2 is a kind of dustbin. And then some of the more recent ones, BB-8 is a sort of a spinning beach ball. And these are great examples of non-humanoid robots, not even animal-like. They're just sort of bits of technology, but they move in such an interesting way and friendly way, and they're sort of intrinsically good robots, but they're different from us. And I think that's maybe the interesting thing, is to explore what this new kind of intelligent entity is going to be like, because we are going to have more of these. And people that have vacuum cleaner robots or lawnmower robots, they have relationships with them, it's like having a pet that wanders around your living room and it cleans up after you. So what's not to like? I think that this is probably more of certainly the near-term future, is robots being useful, making your life better, hopefully, and being actually on some level a non-human companion that might actually enrich our lives.
Thank you, Tony. Isabella, do you have a final thought for us?
I agree with what Tony said. So I just might add with a good regulation and good ethics behind it. So I think this is really important. But it's part of our lives, so we have to deal with it, and we will.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much, Isabella. Thank you, Tony. Thank you to everyone who's watching on YouTube. Very, very happy that you're here and listening and watching to all of this. Thank you very much, and